Have you ever noticed how one casual joke can turn into a full-blown internet myth? Because that's exactly what happened when Millie Bobby Brown and Noah Schnapp admitted they had a marriage pact. What sounded like a lighthearted comment between best friends suddenly became a storyline fans refused to let go of. But the truth is, that pact was never about romance. It was about something much deeper and much more uncomfortable to admit. Millie and Noah didn't meet in a normal way. They didn't grow up in the same neighborhood or sit next to each other in class. They met as kids on a TV set, surrounded by cameras, adults, and expectations most people don't face until adulthood, if ever. They were barely 10 years old when Stranger Things began, and from that moment on, their lives stopped looking anything like a regular childhood. When fame hits that early, it changes how you connect to people. School friendships fade, normal milestones disappear, and the people who understand your reality shrink to a very small circle. That's why Millie and Noah bonded so quickly. It wasn't just about getting along on set. It was about finding someone who understood the pressure, the isolation, and the weirdness of growing up in public. They've both talked openly about that. Noah has said he didn't grow up in a traditional school environment, which meant he missed out on the usual childhood friendships. Millie has spoken about how overwhelming it was to be so young in an industry dominated by adults and expectations. In that environment, comfort matters more than anything. Feeling safe matters more than image. And that's exactly what their friendship became. But once Stranger Things turned into a global phenomenon, their dynamic stopped belonging only to them. Every laugh, every joke, every press interview moment was clipped, reposted, and analyzed. Fans didn't just enjoy their chemistry, they rewrote it. Playfulness became proof. Comfort became tension. And before long, a friendship was being treated like a slow-burn love story waiting for its final episode. That's the context people forget when they bring up the marriage pact. When Millie and Noah joked about getting married if they were both still single at 40, the internet heard destiny. What they actually described was something far more practical. They talked about being good roommates, about it being completely platonic, about no kids, dogs only, separate bedrooms, nothing about romance, nothing about longing, just two people laughing about a future where no matter what happened, they wouldn't be alone. That detail changes everything, because that kind of pact doesn't sound like a love story, it sounds like a safety plan. It sounds like two people who grew up in chaos creating a hypothetical future where at least one thing felt stable. When you've spent your formative years being watched, judged, and projected onto, the idea of guaranteed companionship, even jokingly, hits differently. It's not about attraction, it's about certainty in a life that rarely offers any. But while the internet froze that moment in time, real life kept moving. Millie grew up fast, faster than a lot of fans were ready to accept. While people were still shipping her with a co-star she had clearly defined as a friend, she was building a serious relationship away from the spotlight. And then she did something that completely broke the fantasy. She got married young. That's when the tone shifted. Suddenly, the marriage pact wasn't cute anymore. It felt awkward, outdated, like a joke taken too seriously for too long. And for some fans, that was hard to process, because the pact had become a symbol of a version of Millie they didn't want to let go of. A version frozen in time. Still part of the story they thought they knew. But here's where the story gets interesting, because Noah's reaction didn't match the drama people expected. There was no jealousy arc, no cryptic messages, no tension-filled interviews. Instead, there was support, playful comments. The kind of ease you only see when a relationship isn't built on insecurity. When Millie shared moments of her life with Jake, Noah didn't fade into the background or turn into a footnote. He showed up as exactly what he'd always been, a best friend. And that's the part that quietly shuts down the fantasy. Because if there were unresolved feelings, this would have been the moment they surfaced. Instead, what people saw was comfort, acceptance, a bond that didn't need to be rewritten to survive change. So why did so many fans want this to be romantic in the first place? Because we're trained to believe that deep emotional closeness must eventually turn into romance. When two people grow up together, protect each other, laugh constantly, and share history, our brains try to file that connection under endgame. Platonic intimacy doesn't fit neatly into the stories we're used to telling. But platonic bonds can be just as intense, sometimes even more so. They're built on trust instead of desire, on shared experience instead of chemistry, and they don't collapse when one person's life moves in a new direction. That's why the prank stories people love to retell actually matter more than they seem. Not because they're funny, but because they show trust. You don't prank someone relentlessly unless you know the relationship can handle it. You don't cross those lines unless you feel safe doing so. In an industry full of pressure and performance, that kind of carefree energy is rare. And it ties back to something Millie has talked about more seriously, what it's like to grow up under constant scrutiny. She's been very open about how exhausting it is to have her appearance, maturity, and choices dissected as she ages. That kind of pressure reshapes how you value relationships. You stop caring about who looks good next to you and start caring about who feels real when everything else feels fake. Seen through that lens, the marriage pact makes sense. Not as a promise meant to come true, but as a reflection of where they were emotionally at the time. Two young people acknowledging that their lives might not follow a traditional path, and that if things didn't work out the way society expected, they'd still have someone who knew them before the noise. And that's why the pact didn't need to happen to matter. It already did its job. It gave them a sense of control when very little felt controllable. It gave fans a glimpse into how child stars cope with uncertainty. And then, like many things said at that age, it naturally expired as life evolved. The internet wanted a romantic payoff. What it got instead was something far healthier. A friendship strong enough to survive growth, change, and completely different life choices. And maybe that's the part people struggle with most. Because it forces us to accept that not every meaningful bond needs a dramatic ending. Some connections are meant to be anchors, not destinations. Some promises are made to help you through a phase, not define your future. So when people ask whether Millie and Noah will ever actually follow through on that marriage pact, the real answer might be simpler than anyone expects. They don't need to. The pact already did what it was meant to do. And sometimes that's the most honest ending of all.